welcome to a new episode of Her Voice. Eating disorders are responsible for the highest number of deaths from psychiatric illness. The Eating Disorders Association estimates that about 165,000 people in the UK have eating disorders, with 10% dying as a result. But experts believe it could be higher. Most sufferers are women, but 1 in 10 are now men. The most common eating disorders are anorexia, bulimia, and compulsive overeating. Anorexia, which involves depriving the body of food, is more common in young people. Children as young as 3 have been treated for it, whereas bulimia is characterized by a cycle of starving and binging and is more likely to affect adults. The emphasis on super-thin models has been blamed for the increase in eating disorders, but the causes of eating disorders are usually more complex and are linked to several factors. With me in the studio, a panel of medical experts that will inform us more about these eating disorders and their increase within our societies. I would like to welcome Dr. Salah Abou-El-Fadl, consultant psychiatrist in London, and Mrs. May Simpkin, nutritional therapist, also in London. Welcome to the show.
Hello.
But before we actually start asking the questions, let's watch this report that highlights these growing eating disorders.
Dying actress Rachel Farouk, aged 37, made a heart-wrenching video plea for help as hospitals refuse to treat her because her dangerous weight makes her a liability. Rachel has been suffering from anorexia nervosa for over 10 years, now leaving her emaciated, breathless and too weak to move around on her own. Anorexia nervosa is a complex eating disorder in which the victim undergoes self-starvation. Some behavioral signs exhibited by people suffering from anorexia include a refusal to maintain a healthy body weight, an intense fear of gaining weight, and a distorted body image. It is a condition that occurs predominantly in females of all ages, although men are prone to suffering from this illness as well. What may begin as a normal diet is carried to extremes, with many reducing their intake to an absolute minimum. Another type of eating disorder is bulimia nervosa. Bulimia is thought to be 2 to 3 times more common than anorexia, but it is not generally as physically dangerous. Bulimia was only officially recognized in the 1970s and is characterized by presence of regular episodes of uncontrolled overeating of large amounts of food, namely binge eating. When the binge is over, the person with bulimia nervosa feels guilty and purges to rid his or her body of the excess calories. Excessive shape and weight concerns are characteristics of bulimia nervosa, associated with weight control methods to counteract the perceived and feared effects of overeating. The number of women, children and especially teenagers seeking help for an eating disorder has risen by 110% in the past 3 years, according to figures given exclusively to The Independent on Sunday. Medical research completed last year in the UK showed there had been a 15% increase in diagnosis of eating disorders in the decades since the year 2000. Social media is being blamed for the soaring numbers of sufferers, especially teens, from eating disorders. It seems the popularity of celebrity culture and numerous social media outlets may be contributing to the increasing number of teens with eating disorders. Eating disorders are complicated, serious and potentially devastating. There are many misconceptions in our society about what causes them, and they are rarely about food or wanting to be thin.
Welcome to the show, Dr. Salah and May. Dr. Salah, just wanted to ask you, in the actual report we highlighted that there are misconceptions in our societies about the causes of these eating disorders. Could you actually give us sort of an idea, what are the different types of eating disorders and what causes it?
Well, as your report mentioned and you said in your introduction, the most important eating disorder is anorexia nervosa. It is completely different from bulimia nervosa. These are the main issues. Of course, compulsive eating is a variant of bulimia nervosa, but the anorexia and the bulimia are the 2 opposing ends of the disorder.
Right.
In anorexia, there is an intense irrational fear of putting on weight. That's the main problem of the patient with such condition. While in bulimia nervosa, there is essentially low self-esteem, feelings of lack of confidence, and fear of not looking good in front of other people. So there is this variation between eating because people like to eat and then feeling bad about themselves and then try to lose their weight, and they are they experience the yo-yo mechanism
Right.
or yo-yo phenomenon where they put on weight and then lose it and they keep doing that. But the anorexia is someone who is intensely afraid, and the fear becomes irrational. They become oblivious to all advices, all feedback from people around them say, you look all right, or you have lost a great deal of weight, and they still think, no, I haven't lost weight, I'm overweight. So you can see them like you've seen in the picture, they look skinny and bony, but themselves, when they look at themselves in the mirror, they think they're overweight. So there is a degree of irrationality there. There are lots of other issues like obsessionality. They are obsessed with the weight gain or the fear of putting on weight, and so they starve themselves to extremes, really, to causing themselves serious physical health problems, and as you said, some of them actually die because of the condition.
May, what would a patient suffering from an eating disorder expect on their first visit to a nutritionist? What do they go through?
Well, the first thing we have to try and do is ask the patient to see whether we can accept the fact that there is a problem and there is something that you need to do. That is the first thing, because a nutritionist can help the patient to achieve a healthy diet, but they need to want to do it. So that's one of the first things that we need to look into, how we can achieve that. Once we have that acceptance, then we need to try and find a way of having a healthier relationship with food. So maybe some of the negative perceptions that they may have, we need to try and change that so they have a much healthier, more accepting way about food. Because, they need to understand that food is a fuel, and without that fuel, there are going to be health implications.
That's right, right. Who's actually most likely to develop an eating disorder and why? Maybe from a psychological point of view. Who's most likely? Who's prone to it?
It's a ragbag. There are various presentations. It usually happens in young people, young girls or adolescent girls, and it grows on from that, although, as you say, also some males are joining the club. And there is a stereotype. They have to be people who are a bit on the obsessive side, a bit on the perfectionist, ambitious, wanting to achieve, wanting to appear good. They have, and they usually, when they work, they can be very hardworking. But there is also more prevalence of marital discord in the parents. So you find those girls come from families where the parents do not get on well, or there is a lot of tension in the relationship, or there is some obsessionality amongst the parents. But these are the main issues that you see in them.
We said also that men can actually develop an eating disorder as well as women. So why would that be for a man? I mean, a man normally comes across as very strong and powerful emotionally, so why would we actually expect to see a man, sort of suffering from an eating disorder? I find it a bit sort of strange. What do you think? May?
Well, eating disorders can really stem from body image, and these days there's a lot of influences from the magazines and the TV programs, celebrity culture. So there is a very big influence where, men want to appear to be exactly like this, and it's actually quite hard to achieve that. These people work very, very hard. So, men being strong, they also want to be in control of the situation. Of course. Really with anorexia and bulimia, there's a huge element of wanting to take control of your diet. That's something that you can really control, what you eat, what goes in.
Yes, of course.
So, so it's, men and women are both susceptible
to it. Taking laxatives, going on to bulimia now, taking laxatives, exercising every day, what effect does it have on the body of an eating disorder patient suffering from bulimia, for example? Because that's from a nutritional point of view. How does it affect?
Well, taking laxatives really removes everything from the body. So all the nutrients, everything that you've eaten, actually you are artificially removing it very quickly. So your body isn't actually processing that food and therefore absorbing the nutrients. So without those nutrients, you are at risk of malnutrition.
I see.
So on a regular basis, that's going to have a cumulative effect. So you're going to be at risk risk of malnutrition and the repercussions of that. So your body simply doesn't have the nutrients for the processes to take place.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Dr. Salah, the current increase in anorexia nervosa is believed to be linked to the public's obsession with exercise and fitness and the pressure to look thin just like their sort of favorite celebrities and models. How much of this is true?
It's true, like May has just said earlier on, that the effect of the media, of the general culture, the emphasis on appearance, on being slim and being attractive is becoming extremely important.
It is,
and
yeah.
with media, with TVs and computers, iPads, smartphones, all that, people are obsessed all the time with watching celebrities, watching film stars and models and all that, which all concentrate on slimness, being slim. And it has become, slimness has become the stereotype of being attractive. That if you are attractive, you have to be slim. Of course, that's not true, and many people have different awareness or different outlook on beauty, and beauty is not just being slim. There's a lot of other factors in it. But that is the problem, and that's the effect on people who are impressionable, who are usually young, and that's why you see the problem. But that's one aspect only. Another aspect, as we said earlier on, that in bulimia, it's not just that. There is also a problem with self-esteem, with confidence, with maybe tendency to feeling depressed or unfulfilled. And again, here, people tend to want to compensate for these feelings of inadequacy or incompetence or of lack of confidence by thinking that if they only look better, if they only were slimmer, then everything would be right, and then they become obsessed or preoccupied with their weight, and they go through these phases of eating and then slimming down and so on. So it's the society plays an important role, media play an important role, but also the self-concept of the individual themselves.
Right. May, eating disorders are mainly prevalent amongst the wealthy elites. Is it true, and has it managed to sort of reach the MENA region, which is Middle East, North Africa and so on?
I'm sure it's prevalent everywhere.
But it hasn't been sort of, there's no evidence, as in there's no proper statistics to reflect upon a number of sufferers, because that's, we've tried to find some statistics, but there wasn't some exact, information that we can actually get hold of.
Yes, I mean, it really needs somebody to actually take those statistics and go and find them, where it's recognised as a disease, as a disorder, and if it isn't, because very often it can just be swept along as, she just wants to lose weight, he just wants to look good. It's not recognised as a disease, whereas elsewhere it has been recognised as a disease, as a mental health disease, that we have to put the nutrition with that once it's been recognised. So I think maybe in time, as it becomes more accepted, those statistics will become more available.
Okay. So, all right. Well, with me on Skype is a young woman and mother of 3 children from Egypt who wants to share her story and her daughter's ordeal with anorexia nervosa. Welcome to the show, Minna.
Hello. Hi, Dina.
How are you?
I'm good, thank you very much. Hello to everyone.
Hello there. Right, can you describe to our viewers your daughter and how did it all start with her?
Yeah, of course. Forgive me, Dina, for I wrote some notes to remind me with the points I need to discuss, as I'm afraid I'm having my post-traumatic stress disorder in the form of a severe memory loss. And also given that I'm a coward in public speaking. First of all, let me highlight something before I start. I was willing to share my experience through this program in order to light a candle in the dark tunnel of anorexia and eating disorders. I heartfully hope to rectify some wrong perceptions and also dream of highlighting some of the nightmares that me, my daughter, other parents and patients live while suffering from these killing kinds of disorders. I also don't want to get tempted by whining about and discussing my personal problems and details that will not benefit the whole mission of spreading awareness among all related parties. Just forgive me if I don't want to dig deep or just go deeply into personal details. At the end of the day, I need to light a candle, as I mentioned, and I want to keep my daughter's dignity at the end of the day. Let me tell you that no matter how much people would sympathize and understand the slowly killing we're experiencing with eating disorders, none will ever get the endless amount of pain that we really feel. About 5 years ago, when my daughter had her first round of the sickness, we were living within very hard and actually sick circumstances. Given that there is a recipe for anorexia, where the person hit by anorexia is mostly sensitive, pure, caring, kind, smart, emotional. My eldest was the most one to absorb and get severely affected by the life circumstances we were living. Given also that I was always the kind of passive and weak character, I used to hid from storms and confrontations, mistakenly thinking that I was safeguarding the kids from the unknown and from the battles and stuff like that. After a sad incident that my daughter was witnessing, she started continuously complaining from a tummy ache. Thus, I started the long and tough journey with physical doctors. She was diagnosed with loads and loads of wrong diagnoses. I was asked to do, of course, like a million zillion panoramas, blood analysis, sonars, and had sadly taken loads of wrong tablets. The tummy ache didn't get any better, and with her getting more and more sad and depressed, the amount of food and fluid intakes were diminished, claiming from her point of view, of course, that this was because of the tummy ache, and with me not knowing what was happening, I sort of believed it was the upset tummy. Till I was advised to go to see a French doctor, and I remember this incident where we went holding the loads of files and reports and everything, and the doctor, of course, gave her a checkup. He had a look on the reports, and then he told me, your daughter's problem is here and here, not here, pointing at the tummy. And then I started my second episode of course, the ongoing nightmares, trying to seek psychiatrists and psychologists in Egypt for quite a long time, and I swear I haven't heard the word anorexia even once. Actually, one of them told me, you take your daughter to, a lovely restaurant with meat aroma and stuff, and she will eat, and don't forget to come and thank me afterwards.
That's terrible.
Yeah, and fortunately, after about maybe a year hopping in this loop, I was gifted with a doctor who had her education in the UK, and this was the first time I hear the word anorexia, and at that time I felt like relieved. So what my daughter was suffering finally has a name and a description, and I thought it would be the end of the nightmare. And afterwards, with the second attack, this was the severe one, the very, very, very bad one, where the individual therapy at that time doesn't yield much results. So I was advised by my doctor to evacuate the girl and try to seek hospital treatment. And given that we don't have these facilities in Egypt, and at that time I didn't have an option but take the girl who was literally dying with a very, very compromised physical and psychological state and run away to the UK trying to seek proper treatment for her.
Oh dear. It's very heartbreaking listening to your story, Mina. It really is. Do you think that your daughter is trying to punish herself because she's feeling she's losing control over her situation at home?
Yeah. I totally admire what I heard so far about the reasons for anorexia and the kind of analysis that it might be like sort of looking good and stuff like that. But I don't actually agree 100% with this. The nature of this disorder is very complex, of course, and of course the doctors know about this beyond description. But yes, to an extreme extent, my daughter always felt responsible for our sufferers. She felt that my passiveness and acceptance to live within such a harsh, environment and circumstances was entirely her fault. As from her point of view, her mommy didn't choose to run away or do necessary confrontations based on keeping the family head together, and because she was there. So she would come to me at times and say that if she were not born, I wouldn't have bared this life, and things like that. She also perceived being blackmailed sometimes and generally poorly treated by a very sadly close family member as being not good enough to deserve a fair treatment. So she didn't see or view herself as a human being who would deserve and earn to be treated fairly. She always thought she was the reason why she was being fairly treated and bullied at times. At the point, she felt her whole world was falling apart, and she always believed that this was because she misbehaved. Coming from the fact that she has always been a sensible and a caring creature, she believed that if she somehow disappeared, everyone would have been better off.
Oh, it's terrible. It's terrible. I mean, what do you think, Dr. Salah? What do you think of the story, of Minna's story?
Well, it's a typical story of course, a very caring mother who can see the difficulty of her daughter and doesn't know. But she is stressing a very important point, is how the girl is perceiving herself. And that's very important, how she feels about herself. She hasn't mentioned family problems, which one can understand and sympathize with. But we see different variations, you know. You don't see one typical example. You see various aspects from different presentations in one person. So here we see the most important bit is about the low self-esteem and not feeling confident or not feeling able to satisfy herself. And of course, I heard something about this advice that you take her to a nice restaurant, and if she smells the food, unfortunately that does not work, you know. And I'm sure May will elaborate more on that, it's not the attraction of the food. You can see anorexic girls sitting for hours in front of a plate with some nice food in it, and they're just playing with the fork and the knife without actually eating it. So it's not that easy. They become almost averse even to the smell of nice food. They become most disinterested in nice food. They don't really, the pressure that comes from within to avoid eating becomes stronger.
I mean, May, is it more difficult should parents keep an eye on their children's eating habits? I mean, obviously with Mina, she noticed how her daughter was complaining of pain in her stomach, you know, she was refusing to eat. So should parents sort of start getting concerned if they notice a change in their eating habits?
Yes, definitely. And there are a lot of telltale signs that, you know, we don't often recognise as signs that could escalate. So, you know, one of the first things that teenage girls start talking about is perhaps turning vegetarian, because then, you know, at that point they can start restricting what they eat. It then means that they don't have to eat within family meals because they don't eat the meat. The rest of the meal maybe doesn't focus on very much else apart from the meat, so it then means that they don't eat so much at that meal. Very often saying that they're full, they're not hungry, they're in a rush, so they don't eat. There are lots of signs like that initially you can dismiss, but when they're ongoing and they become regular, I would say that they are telltale signs that you need to address a little bit more seriously. From a physical perspective, you know, if the diet is lacking, there will be some physical symptoms, so the hair, the nails, the skin. You know, these are signs as well. It takes a little bit longer for those symptoms to manifest themselves. But yes, I think, you know, these sort of things you shouldn't really ignore.
Minna, how easy is it now for you to work with a specialist in Egypt to follow on, obviously, with your daughter's condition after having left to go back to Egypt?
Frankly speaking, at the moment, I decided to discharge Lana because of the lack of resources and come back to Cairo. I took a very, very bold decision of replacing the whole hospital, the doctors, the nurses, the dietitians, the psychologists, and actually everyone else with only me. Given that the individual therapy doesn't play a very, I don't know, this is my own opinion, very successful role when the when the case becomes that complex, as in my daughter's case. You need like a whole team to be backing you up. You need the parents actually need coaching. You need someone to be supervising. You need a kind of family therapy for the other siblings and everybody else living with this case in the house, to be able to bundle up all the activities together and to reach success. My psychiatrist is very, very good, but still she's suffering much as I do with the culture, with the perceptions, with the judgmental kind of opinions that poor girls like mine get here in this environment and in this culture. So when I came back, I'm acting like I am the dietitian, I am the psychiatrist, I am sarcastically the doctor and everyone. I'm bounded with the lack of resources. The treatment for 1 year in the UK made me literally broke. So I can't go for the very expensive treatments. Rather, can I go back and hospitalize her, given that she was discharged like 3 to 6 months prior to the completion of her treatment. So now it's only me with her.
Oh, you've got a very, very, sort of big burden, isn't it, Dr. Salah? It's a big commitment, isn't it?
It's commendable what Mina is doing for her daughter, but I just need to remind you and your viewers that treating anorexia nervosa essentially concentrates on changing the behavior. That, training the girl to actually eat. And what she's done for over a year in the hospital was actually to stress the change in eating habits and encourage the girls to eat, to gradually do away with the bad habit of not eating and concentrate on eating. But of course, some of the girls can be quite stubborn and can be quite difficult to follow. And that is a battle. And that's why it takes a long time. And that's why she stayed a year, and which took a lot of cost, of course, which is understandable. But so Mina can concentrate on changing the behavior. With the passage of time, there is some chance of maturation, that the girl can mature and start to feel different about herself. But also there is a need to concentrate or to give some attention to the self-perception and to the ideas of the individual patient themselves. Where is it coming from? Is it coming from a low self-esteem, or is it coming from a high degree of obsessionality and perfectionism, or is it coming from emotional conflict, being torn apart between two parents who are both good, but they seem to not get on and pulling from different. The parents don't have to be bad people. The parents are usually very caring, loving, but themselves are highly strung, highly conscientious, hardworking, with maybe a lot of tension between them because they want to achieve a lot. And so that reflects in the growing girl in becoming too averse to eating and so on. So it's a question also of looking at these dynamics and trying to address them sympathetically, with encouragement, with love, not with criticism.
No, absolutely.
And that sometimes helps the young girl to reach some peace with herself and maybe start to respond to the treatment.
Actually, with us at the moment is it Dr. Jeremy Alford? Yes. Dr. Jeremy Alford is a clinical psychologist and hypnotherapist, and founder and president of the Middle East Eating Disorders Association. Welcome to the show, Dr. Jeremy.
Thank you.
Dr. Jeremy, how and when did you set up the Middle East Eating Disorders Association?
So this has been a project that has been in development since 2009, and we've been developing really slowly. Since it's a non-profit organization, where we've been really seeking for volunteers to help with the cause. The cause primarily is to really raise awareness on eating disorders, which, as you know, is a growing problem in the region, and not a lot of people know about it.
Right. And how
Of
did
course,
you
there
actually...
will be other activities as well.
Oh, I see. Right. How did you actually start raising awareness of these eating disorders in the Middle East through your organization?
Okay, so what we do is we begin by speaking to schools and just inform teachers and as well as parents to understand what the signs are, how to recognize these, and then what steps to do in order to help the student or the child. And in terms of children themselves or students themselves, it's just raising awareness in a very careful way. Sometimes raising awareness can actually sometimes for some people it can actually trigger the onset of the actual condition. There's a lot of studies that have been showing the effect of raising too much awareness can actually have can be kind of counterproductive for some people. So we need to be really careful of the way we do that. But that's how we've been doing it for now. So really targeting schools and teachers and parents.
Great stuff. And how are you able to diagnose a patient with an eating disorder in that region? And do parents take it seriously, as probably they haven't heard of such an illness?
Yeah, I mean, of course, generally, there's obviously the stigma of mental health in general, and eating disorders in particular. A lot of parents, first of all, will find it very hard to understand that this is something that is happening to their child and their teenager. It's not something that they are necessarily doing on purpose. So there's a lot of blame going on with respect to parents.
Dr. Jeremy, how are you able to diagnose a patient with an eating disorder in that region, and do parents take it seriously, as they probably haven't heard of such illness?
Yeah. So usually the way we diagnose this, is there are signs, it's very specific symptoms that the parents, first of all, cannot deny, because obviously there's a significant weight loss. If we're talking about anorexia, bulimia, you can notice that their child is perhaps very pale looking because of the self-induced vomiting. So there are specific signs that will alert the parent that there's something that they have to be concerned about. And from that point, they will begin to seek help. They might not necessarily know who to go and see, but eventually they will be referred to a psychologist or to a psychiatrist, and in some cases, a nutritionist. In other cases, it will be the doctor himself. It might even be a dentist who might alert parents of something going on because of signs shown in the teeth, or because of maybe signs of acidity in the gum. So they might notice some details that will eventually give an indication or some alarm or some alert to the parent, who will then go and see a psychologist, as I said before, or a psychiatrist or a dietitian. And then from then on, this is how we then talk to the parents about it, and it is most of the time it's difficult for parents to understand. So there is a lot of work to be done with parents. Most of the time, to educate them about what this is, how this is going on, and that this is not something that their child is actually doing on purpose, but it's an actual medical illness. It's a medical condition. That means there is some point it crossed the threshold of it being something that the child or the teenager was aiming for, perhaps because they wanted to lose maybe a bit of weight. And they might have started by going on some very light diet, which then moved on to something much more strict, etc. That's just one example.
I see. How important or how much support do sort of eating disorder patients get within clinics in the Middle East, and what treatment plans do the patients have put in place for them?
Okay. Unfortunately, in the Middle East, there is actually there's a lack of eating disorder specialists, and so that means that the treatment supports that are offered are rather limited to medical care in terms of stabilization, in terms of admitting the person, in terms of, again, it depends on the severity of the condition. So we're talking about hospitalization, where the patient will stay for maybe 10 days, and then they will then be discharged. They might then see a psychologist, but psychologists trained in eating disorders are very, very few. Then sometimes there will be nutritionists. One of the problems is that we face, or that I've experienced here in this region, is the lack of proper and solid teamwork. So really having a full multidisciplinary team working in the same place for the long-term recovery of a person with eating disorders. A lot of the treatments in the region are based on short-term treatments, which unfortunately doesn't necessarily help the patients in the long-term recovery. So you've got a lot of relapse that goes on.
That's unfortunate, yeah.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. However, there are also growing number of support groups that are starting to mushroom in the region. Again, mental health is something that has a big stigma, so people will not feel very comfortable with attending or joining support groups such as Overeaters Anonymous, which you might be familiar with.
Yes.
It's groups that are generally free of charge, and people then they go and they follow a program which is also known as a 12-step recovery program, and they go through their own willingness to go, and then they go through the stages of care, and this is something that we're starting to see more and more of in Lebanon and in the UAE and in Qatar. They have different support groups, so people who are suffering from usually from bulimia more readily will attend these groups rather than anorexics or people at a severe level of their anorexia. But again, just to show that there are signs of progress that are happening, but there's still kind of a lot of work to do, which professionally speaking is kind of frustrating because you can see the growing number of cases, but the level of treatment and level of care is still not up to scratch, which is hopefully one of the missions that we're trying to do as an organization, is to try to raise sufficient awareness, at least so that somehow we can get financial support to develop such a residential treatment facility, exactly like you find in the UK or in other countries, in other developed countries in the West.
Yeah. You're actually specialized in clinical hypnotherapy. How effective is it in treating patients with eating disorders, and is it more successful than the traditional methods?
Okay, so my background as a clinical psychologist is in cognitive behavioral therapy. Clinical hypnotherapy is an additional skill that I've added, which I combine with more of a cognitive behavioral model. I find this extremely useful to help reinforce reframing techniques and helping the person to review their ways of thinking and their ways of behaving. So it's more in light of that aspect that it's very useful. Another aspect of clinical hypnotherapy that's useful is also in terms of helping person maybe get to feel a little bit more relaxed. That's something that a lot of people with eating disorders find very difficult because of high anxiety levels and not feeling good in their skin because of poor body image. So it can be a really useful technique, not itself, but in combination with many other therapeutic methods.
Mm-hmm.
Okay?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And finally, Dr. Jeremy, how easy
and obviously
is it?
there's a lot of misunderstanding. There's a lot of misunderstanding with what hypnosis and hypnotherapy is in the field. So obviously that in itself it requires a lot of awareness and educating people about what it is versus what it is not, and therefore all the misconceptions behind that.
I see. Right, finally, Dr. Jeremy, how easy is it for patients to get in touch with you and contact your organization?
Well, what we're doing is trying to, as much as possible, to promote over media, social medias, talking again to schools and students and institutions in the region. We have other experts in the field that are based in the UAE, other in Lebanon, and so everybody's kind of doing it, and it's more of a process of word of mouth. In the end, I mean, hopefully with enough funding, that's really been the weakness that we have had till now is the lack of funding. With funding, we're able to promote more. We're able to reach out to more people, and hopefully, if that's something that can, if we can get some more support, then that would be helping more people in the area. Obviously, one of the things that's also important is we are aiming to set up on the website an online helpline in which we'll be able to offer free online support. So for people who have questions, people don't know who to talk to, who to turn to, parents who are not too sure what's going on, they will be able to access and get that help online. It's a form of kind of a Samaritans for the region, and hopefully with funding we'll be able to do much more. So it's really something that is a work that we all do together, as opposed to just one person. It's more everybody does this together for the cause, and also most importantly to recognize that eating disorders is something that's real, and it's affecting a lot of people in the area.
Well, I do wish you the best of luck with what you're doing, Dr. Jeremy, because it sounds really brilliant and amazing, and obviously, you know, it's all for the good cause and good reasons. Dr. Jeremy Alfred, founder and president of MEDA, thank you so much for your valuable contribution.
You're welcome.
You're welcome. Thank you. After the break, we will be speaking to a young lady that suffers from anorexia nervosa and is on the road to recovery. See you later.
A long time ago I had anorexia bulimia. Yeah, so I've already been through it, so but I've gone the other way now.
Anorexia is where you sort of starve yourself, you don't eat, and bulimia is where you eat and then you throw it up to make yourself skinnier.
I actually do know somebody who has suffered from it and been treated for it, and yes, you can tell unless the metabolism and they're extremely thin for a reason. But usually if you are on an extreme, you can kind of tell something's amiss, or with their eating habits probably.
Yeah, I think so. If we've been with close friend, yeah.
Yeah, because obviously their lifestyle would change and their habits would change as well.
Yeah.
I think one of them is where you just completely don't eat, and one of them is where you eat and throw up.
I mean, I think I know what the difference between the two is. I'm not sure I'd be able to tell the difference between someone suffering from one and suffering from the other.
My sister had it, so I was quite confronted with it when I was a teenager.
Welcome back to the show. On the phone, I have Ruby. Welcome to the show, Ruby. I have read your recent blogs about how nervous you are about today, so thank you so much for being so brave to come onto the show and share your story with our viewers.
Oh, thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Ruby, when I read your blogs and what was it? And on Then She Disappeared. I think that's what it's called, I think.
That's right, yeah, yes. And Then She Disappeared.
Yes, that's it. I admired your honesty and compassionate feelings towards other eating disorder sufferers. Could you please tell us more about your condition? How did it all start, and at what age, please?
Yeah, of course. Well, I'm 32 now at the moment, and I was diagnosed with anorexia when I was 19. So it was anorexia at first, and over time it kind of morphed into bulimia. So I was battling both. I've seen many counsellors and therapists over the years. I've been an inpatient also, and it's been a battle over the years. But thankfully now I seem to be on the road to recovery.
I see. Right. And what need does your eating disorder fulfill in you, Ruby?
Well, I suppose that's a very important point to make, is that, there is a payoff for somebody with an eating disorder. They wouldn't use these behaviours if they weren't getting some sort of relief or payoff from that. And I suppose in my situation, back when I was 19, there was a lot going on in my life. There was a lot going on at home. I wasn't particularly happy. I suffered a lot with anxiety. And I suppose I was looking for something to kind of fill, I suppose I had a hole in my soul is how I would describe it. I was looking for something to fulfill this sadness I felt inside me. And when my eating disorder began, it fulfills that need.
I see. I've got Dr. Salah here with us. He's a psychiatrist. Dr. Salah, when a patient acknowledges that they have a mental condition and cry out for help, literally, does it make it easier to start treatment?
It's a very good sign. It's a very good sign and encouraging that Ruby realized that there is a problem and she wanted help. It doesn't mean that it's easy, of course, because she has to struggle, like many other patients, struggle with the urge not to eat, the urge to keep the weight down. In her case, she had a bit of both. She had a bit of anorexia and then she merged into bulimia, which in a way is a good sign because it moves from the entrenched position of not being able to eat and wanting to lose weight to wanting to eat and then struggling to lose some weight. And so actually it's slightly better in that respect. And that explains why she also had that insight into the condition and realized she has a problem. It certainly helps because they put themselves to the test, they seek help, they try to make it work, and that moves on.
Ruby, has your condition ever relapsed and you found yourself losing the battle with your illness?
Yes, most definitely. I have had a lot of relapses over the years. And I think it's important to mention that also, that relapse is part and parcel of recovery. You know, sometimes it feels like it's 2 steps forward and 1 step back. But I think the important thing is to learn from the relapse and move on and move onwards and upwards. But yes, most definitely I have had relapses, but I've always learned something from them and gone on to be stronger for it.
I see. And how close are you to recovery, do you think?
I am close. I suppose I'm the best I've ever been, really, in regards with my eating disorder. My mood has improved an awful lot. My anxiety has improved an awful lot. I suppose when I was in the midst of my illness, you know, my world had shrunk to just me and the disorder. I rarely left the house. I didn't see friends. I wasn't engaging in work or study or anything like that. And now, you know, I hope to start a course in September. You know, I have a social life now. I go out with my family. I see my friends, and
Excellent.
you know, I suppose the isolation is the one thing that's very hard about the eating disorder. And if people can just reach out, you know, just take that first step and reach out. It's so important, you know, to share the problem with others and allow others to help.
Yes, I mean, I've got Mina with us, who, like I sort of said, she's got her daughter who suffers from anorexia nervosa. Mina, what would you like to ask Ruby in relation to her condition and inspirational story?
Yeah, Ruby, I believe you're now maybe in the contemplation stage, aren't you? And you're hopefully in your way to recovery, the full recovery.
Yes.
Do you think you could actually beat this monster that's bullying your ideas about yourself and your head? Could you actually minimize it or kill it?
I actually can't hear it, Dinah.
You can't hear Mina, can you not?
No, no, I can just barely hear her.
Right, okay. I think what she was trying to say is that the ideas that you've got in your head, I mean, can you actually, or this monster, she put it across to you, can you actually minimize it or can you kill it in your head about yourself?
Can you change it, is it?
Yes, yes.
The kind of the beliefs and the ideas you have about yourself?
Yes.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I suppose an eating disorder can be, it's almost like having another voice in your head, a bully, if you like, that kind of puts you down, tells you you're fat, you're ugly, you're worthless. And it's this that feeds the eating disorder. And I think with a lot of help and you know, a good counsellor, a good family support, those beliefs can be changed. You know, I had those beliefs for a long time, those core beliefs that I was a bad person, that I would never get over my illness, and that you know, that I was basically worthless. But it is possible to change those beliefs. You know, I'm very lucky to have a very good counsellor. I have a very strong family around me. And with their help, you know, they're always there to remind me when I am having a down day or I am having these thoughts. They're always there to remind me, you know, that I am a good person and I can get through this. So I think, does that answer your question?
Yes, please do.
No,
yes.
sorry.
Oh, did it answer the question? Sorry, Mina, did it answer the question?
Yes, she did. Thank you.
Excellent. So, Ruby, what advice would you give Mina then to help her cope with her daughter's condition?
Could I just ask, how old is her daughter?
Mina?
Yeah, I was about to mention that. I think, Ruby, you were a bit lucky that this kind of disorder attacked you while you were a bit mature. But sadly, my daughter had her first round of episode of the sickness when she was 9, between 8 and 9 years old, and now she's 12.
Okay, and is it anorexia?
Sorry, yeah, and she's very, very young and helpless, and the idea that yes, this what I call monitor is totally bullying her mind and is not allowing her to get better. The idea of not relapsing is a success in my point of view, but the thing is the steps we're taking are very, very, very small. So we're hanging around the same place for about 4 months now, taking very minimal baby steps, and I don't know if she'll ever, you know, get good again, good as before, as before the first attack, or shall we continue to live like this forever?
Well, I think it's really important, you know, to never give up hope. You know, it's the one thing you should always hold on to. You know, in my darkest days, I really thought that there was no hope for me, and I thought that I was going to die like this. I really did. But what I would say to you is, you know, keep the lines of communication open. You know, don't have the subject as a taboo subject or anything. You know, talk very openly about the eating disorder, so she always feels comfortable to come and talk to you about anything that's bothering her. You know, it's talked about very openly in my family, and that helps. You know, that helps a lot. That it's not a taboo subject or anything like it. But you know, I would just say, you know, love and support are the two most important things. You know, I think if love and support could have gotten me well, I would have gotten well a long time ago. I also have 2 dogs that have been instrumental in my recovery as well. So, yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Thank you so much, Ruby. I mean, I can't thank you enough for agreeing to take part in our show today. I do wish you a full, speedy recovery, and I will continue to read your blogs to hear about all your success stories and your journey to a full recovery. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
You're more than welcome. There is a growing international group of pro-Ana, or anorexia, and pro-Mia, which is bulimia bloggers, who perceive their illness as a lifestyle and urge others to do the same. Communities that glamorize eating disorders have been around for decades, but there is a worrying new generation of personal blogs and social network users who have turned anorexia and bulimia into something of an inspirational state. Let's watch this report.
Of the 1.6 million people in the UK who are affected by an eating disorder, around 2/3 will have visited how-to sites that encourage developing an eating disorder. Last month, as data from the Health and Social Care Information Centre revealed an 8% rise in hospital admissions for eating disorders in 2013, campaigners blamed these websites for the surge, warning that they are fetishizing a serious mental illness and putting young people's lives in danger. Writing about the rise of pro-Ana and pro-Mia, however, is double-edged. There is a danger that any attempt to understand the appeal of the websites will draw them to the attention of new users, perhaps those on the verge of a disorder. Doing anything is made more difficult by the fact that this material is online and the internet is impossible to police. Last year, the social networking sites Tumblr, Pinterest, and Instagram tried to ban thinspiration photographs, images designed to motivate weight loss, but to no avail. They are still populated with pictures of skinny models and actresses flaunting protruding ribs and thigh gaps, simply posted under different names. These are the same pictures frequently used on pro-Ana and pro-Mia websites. Any attempt to ban or regulate their existence would only send their users elsewhere. Instead, experts say the only way to stop these sites is to understand them, to get inside the minds of sufferers and uncover the appeal of the online communities they inhabit. Only by recognizing what turns vulnerable, damaged people into sinister role models for vulnerable individuals will we be able to lure them off the internet and into real-life recovery.
May, combining extreme diet with sports is what girls as young as 9 do, obviously, to sort of lose weight and become very thin. What side effects will this have on really slim and fragile bodies?
Well, I mean, strength is something that they won't have as much of if they're not eating the right foods. And over-exercising is an extreme stressor on the body. So lack of food and over-exercising are two very extreme stressors on the body. And the body will react. It will, there will be signs and symptoms, and they will not have the energy levels, and they will not have the strength to continue. Life will become harder, the energy levels will reduce, and gradually they will have to sort of start retreating, and because they don't have the energy to try and keep up. So it's not a very good combination, but obviously, there is a tendency to do that because they think they're going to burn the calories and lose the weight. But for the extreme exercise, you need the fuel in the first place.
I see. Dr. Salah, what expert advice would you give to both Ruby and Mina?
I think Ruby is already on the right track, and she has already made a lot of progress. What she should do now is to look for her own future and try to think what she would like to be in a few years' time. What job or what activity she should socialize, she should make relationships. She should try to get self-satisfaction from being a human being, interacting with people, and not to concentrate on herself. To forget her body a little and to concentrate on. And she has done a lot of that already, and I think she should promote that in herself. With regards to Mina and all mothers, I think it's important to be aware of what happens to your daughter. And like May said, there are a lot of side effects, a lot of manifestations that happen to young girls that all parents should pay attention to. Losing weight is an important thing. Changing eating habits and avoiding to eat with the family or avoiding to eat in all. Also, there are other more serious problems like stopping of her periods. That can be a very serious sign, and so it shows that the hormones have changed and that the body is reacting to the starvation. So these are the issues, and like Jeremy said, teeth can, because they induce vomiting in themselves after they eat, so the stomach acid starts to affect the teeth and the health. So these are the signs that the parents should be aware of and pay attention to. Discipline, support, sympathy, but firmness in terms of changing eating habits is very important. And again, trying to look for what are the issues in the dynamics around the family, around the young girl that are not helping her.
Mina, briefly, what's your view? How is your child doing now, and what's the future like for her?
Can I add something very quickly to what Dr. Salahan? Yes, please.
Yes, of course.
I'm hearing myself, I'm afraid.
Don't worry, that's fine. We can hear you.
Well, I mean, one of the nightmares that we face is the simplification and generally wrong perception, understanding, and interpretation of eating disorders. The simplification is far away from the truth, and it adds up a lot, to what we already have on our plates. Analyzing an eating disorder as a desire from the patient to lose weight in order to look like mothers, or a laziness from the mom to feed the kids is really hurting. The eating disorders are killing complex disease as much as cancer and diabetes are, and the kids, mostly girls with eating disorders, are not aiming at grabbing attention or looking like models. Those poor girls are hurting and suffering a lot that they literally want to disappear. And I truly wish that regarding the blogs and the website that promotes the idea of anorexia, those minority groups have to be taken very, very seriously, and those activities have to be terminated at the moment. Authorities have to interfere, because this is not a freedom of speech. Those are killing our kids or giving them weapons to kill themselves, and it's nowhere close to freedom of speech. And again, regarding my kid, and again, as I mentioned, we're taking baby steps. We're going very slowly, but thanks God, we're not going in the opposite direction. So slowly but surely, and I'm 100%, we're gonna conquer this, and hopefully she will grow up and be strong enough to change other people's lives. And finally, I want to scream for change. To scream for change of culture, to scream for change of many wrong attitudes and perceptions, to scream for change of law and injustice in our countries, and also to change how those kids are perceived and how they are dealt with, and to change the hurting they hear all the time, and the judgments they hear about their mental conditions and being unfit in the society, and having to hide this because this is a kind of a shameful disease. And I hope to see one day many hospitals, many eating disorders units in my country and in the Middle East, and to stop, burying our heads in the sand, and to admit the cases that we have, and try to treat them, and try to take their hands and bring them back to life.
I do hope that this show has actually managed to raise what you're trying to scream, raise it up, and make sure that your sort of shout or scream or whatever you're trying to put forward is heard, and something is done about it. I was going to ask you about the pro-Ana topic, and now obviously you've managed to answer my question. And I totally believe the fact that obviously, freedom of speech, okay, I agree with you, and I totally support it, but not in this way or in that manner, and especially when it comes to children that are of your daughter's age. Unfortunately, we have come to the end of our show. And I would like to thank you, Mina, for giving up your time to join me today on the show. I would also like to thank Dr. Salah Abou-El-Fadl, consultant psychiatrist, for his valuable advice, Mrs. May Simpkin, nutritionist, for her contributions, Dr. Jeremy Alford, founder and president of MEDA, for taking part in the show, and finally, Ruby, for her courage to speak with us directly on the show today. So thank you all so much for coming with us.
Thank you, Mina.
Thank you, Mina. We are taught to hate our bodies before we ever understand how they work due to the bombardment of images of slim models and celebrities. We are somehow convinced that how much other people like us is directly correlated to how we look. It is important to take care of your body and be conscious of the decisions you make as to what goes in it, and maintaining an active lifestyle. But being so aware of your body is not healthy at any age. We need to understand that our bodies are all different, and they will react differently to how we stimulate them. But you know what the beauty of it all is? That your body is perfect just the way it is. There is so much more to each and every one of us than how we look. Don't hide behind insecurities. Show the world how beautiful imperfections are. A very strong quote I read the other day, which I would like to share with you. When there is no enemy within, the enemies outside cannot hurt you. Therefore, love yourselves more and enjoy life to achieve happiness within yourselves. Only then you will not be conquered by the fear of weight. Stay away from eating disorders and you will never regret it. Goodbye and stay safe.